Good. So it's not 7 yet. So even then, once we get to maybe 7:05, we'll start the presentation if that's all right.
Okay.
Not there, but on the.
Sounds good. I am gonna be right back and go get some water real fast.
Sounds good. I still got some work to do. So it looks like I'm looking at the screen just for other things. Hey, Tina, how's your knee?
My knee's great.
Everything's happy?
Oh, yes.
All right. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, there's everybody's at the meeting, huh? Oh, Bill Oliver, Bill, Gary Shank. How did you do that? Just touch on the bottom?
Hi, Tina.
Hey, how are you, Megan? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Happy holidays.
You too.
Let's see. If you touch on here, you can see everybody that's in the chat.
On the far left of your screen, not that little screen, but on the far left of your whole screen. Yeah. Is that a microphone?
Glad they're figuring out how to work this too.
Yes.
Okay, so this is
Yes.
participants.
What am I
Hey,
supposed to do?
Gary.
there's Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Hey, Greg. Hi, Mary.
Hey,
Hello. Hello. Happy holidays.
Same to you.
Thanks.
Now, the far left of the black.
yeah.
What are you supposed to
Okay, so
do?
here's the 18.
It's just gonna happen?
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll just happen.
Gosh.
So
But
there's
you're coming
everybody
back, right?
there.
All right.
There's more.
Yeah, well, yeah, scroll down.
Scroll up.
Tina, Bill Oliver, Jim Inkley. So then if you touch that, then you get their screen. Is that how that works?
Sweet.
So you get
Okay, just-
participants. That one. Okay. Here's Darren.
Hi.
Hey, Darren.
Hi, Gary.
How's it going, Greg and Myrna?
Doing well.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. How are you?
Oh, fine, fine. Kathy's here too.
I see Kathy.
Hi.
Hi, Kathy.
Nice turnout.
Sounds like a good one.
You got a number of people here. Right. You're the
I'm a camera person.
camera operator.
All right. So we'll wait a few more minutes and then we'll get this
You
thing
don't need to
going.
see this. You don't need
So
to
can you
see
make
that.
it full? Okay, you can make, we know.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
Let's see here.
Michael, it's like this. There's a way to see everybody.
Yeah, how do you do that?
You just have to press the bottom part.
We're all learning how to use this thing.
Well, not we.
Well, I am.
You are. You can chat too.
Yeah, but I think, so
He's
why
the-
do we see his screen and before we were seeing
Oh, you'll see him.
Tina's or
You'll see.
there's
Oh.
Kathy Rich or she's just got a picture of herself. Oh, there's Tina. So how come it goes between participants?
Hold on a second here.
Oh, yeah, I remember that from before. So then you can see everybody that's in the chat.
Zoom, not chat.
Okay, Zoom. But people are no picture. So you can turn off.
Yeah, you can turn off.
your
You can
camera.
turn off yours too.
Yeah. I know.
We can do that. We'll do that.
All right. You put on your makeup.
All right, one more minute.
He can also do it.
It's okay, they can see it.
You've got the tree in the background.
Which one?
The tree.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
I didn't play it that way, but
I know, but it's like, right?
yeah.
Oh boy.
There's more people down below. Just can't, well. See. But I think there's even more because when you get on, it's sort of over the stars.
All right, looks like we're holding steady at 23 participants. So this is our second quarterly, or yeah, I guess it'd be second of the year, our winter edition. And Dylan has been kind enough to volunteer for this, and not living in, I think he lives in Colorado. Is that right, Dylan?
I do, yeah.
So in 2023, I'm sure if some of you have been out there, it was a record snow year in the Sierra. Dylan came out here, I think, after an alpine accident that where he almost lost his life, which he'll tell you about. He came out here
Oh
for
my
5 months
Wow.
and just explored the Sierra and sort of found his love again for the mountains and the alpine. And he's going to share some of those photos from his trip and discuss what his plans were, what worked, what didn't work, and so how that experience helped catapult him back into his sort of mountain obsession. So without further ado, Dylan, take it away.
Sounds good. Just for a little bit of housekeeping, I'm going to mute all microphones except for mine just to
Good idea.
make sure things are facilitated a little bit. So I'm going to do that right now. And then toward the end, I'll set it so that it unmutes everyone so that we can do the Q&A. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dylan Kilby. I'm going to share my little presentation real fast. If y'all will give me a second. And let's see, let's go for the slideshow. All right, can everyone see everything? Oh, sorry, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, good. All right, let's go ahead and start. So the title of this presentation is Summit Fever Dreams, 5 months in the Sierra Nevada. So a little bit about my background. Again, my name is Dylan Kilby. Thanks very much for being here. I live in Golden, Colorado. I've been here since fall of 2023. For those of you who aren't aware, Golden is in the Front Range, kind of like on the west of Denver. Promise I'll get my directions right. I work in emergency management as well as public health for a firm in the Bay Area of San Francisco. I am the Sierra Peak Section Outreach Chair, which I've been in the position since 2023. And it might surprise some of you that I was not born and raised in the mountains whatsoever. I am originally from Florida. Things have changed. Now happily dedicated my life to the mountains, and you'll get kind of a taste of that from where things started and where I am now. So in 2023, for 5 months from approximately May 27th to October 19th, did a trip throughout the Sierra from the north to the south, starting in the Lake Tahoe area and finishing with my Whitney Portal permits on October 10th and 11th. I camped, slept in my car, got the very, very, very rare and occasional hotel. And the goal of this trip was to kind of commit myself to the mountains and also rediscover my love for high places after, as Michael said, an accident that almost took my life very early on in my mountaineering and alpinism career. So, as I said, it might surprise some of you that I had very little mountains experience for most of my life. I started climbing and pursuing alpinism really in like 2021. So only about 4 years. I climbed a little bit at the University of Michigan with their climbing club from fall of 2019 until spring of 2020. But COVID-19 put the kibosh on that pretty quickly. So I really only climbed in the gym for about 4 or 5 months. I had done very like rare occasional trips to the Sierra Nevada, and I had done a lot of hiking and running. So I did have that behind me. But compared to most people, relatively little Sierra experience. And I bring this up both to place a little bit of context for the accident that I'm about to discuss, and also to show people that if you're interested in going to high places, you don't need to be born in these areas in order to do incredible things. I've been very fortunate with my friends, my loved ones, and some solo ventures in these last 4 years that have been extremely fulfilling. And I want to encourage people to do the same thing. So, this accident that I keep referring to, I worked in COVID-19 response for the state of California from 2020 until like roughly mid 2021. I had never been to California beforehand. And so, in order to enjoy myself, to have a little bit of decompression time as the response was going on, I went over to Lake Tahoe and basically started exploring the peaks out there. On my second climb of Pyramid Peak in July 2020, I had planned to do the Crystal Range Traverse, which is where you traverse from the summit that this photo is taken on, Pyramid Peak, going over to Mount Price and Mount Agassiz, which is that kind of curved looking diving board you can see roughly in the middle of the photo. Uh, I it's always funny when I talk about this accident because there's a lot of things that wouldn't happen today that happened back then. I was relatively inexperienced in the terrain. I did not have much alpinism experience. I had a lot of hiking and trail experience. In addition to it being an exceptionally hot and dusty day, and conditions weren't exactly good. I was doing the traverse and got to a point in the traverse that some of my friends have jokingly called the no-no pinnacle, which is a class 4 section that rises about 20 or 30 feet up on the traverse. You can do some escapes left or right. I got very nervous. Instead of committing, I tried escaping to the left, where I kind of saw a much more chiller pathway to get up to Mount Price, and I fell about 30 feet and my head broke the fall. So I'm going to warn you before we go on that you're going to see a couple gross photos from this accident. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you might want to skip ahead like 5 minutes. For those of you who are not comfortable seeing photos of blood, I do recommend not looking at these, and I will let you know when you can look. So 3, 2, 1. Oh, come on. There we go. So I broke my collarbone in 3 different places. I did not realize that my collarbone was broken until I was scrambling down from the summit near where I fell. And I realized that there was a space in between where there should not be. And additionally, I had some pretty severe facial lacerations. One of the things that it's hard to say I'm proud of it, but something that I do think I did the right things is that I self-rescued very successfully. I scrambled down about 2,500 feet, um, came over to a lake and was able to find a trail and actually meet up with some hikers who helped me on the way back so that I could get airlifted to the UC Davis Trauma Center. I was in the hospital for, I think, about 3 days. The memory is fuzzy, as you can imagine, where my collarbone was treated and set. I later got orthopedic surgery on it. I now have a metal collarbone. My party trick is asking people if they want to touch it. It absolutely embarrasses my wife, as well as the facial lacerations that you see on the right. This was a photo that I took immediately upon discharge. And this was a photo that I took about 4 weeks or so later. That's the full list of the injuries that I had. So I broke my collarbone, as I said. I broke my nose. I broke my thumb. I had a left parietal skull fracture, which is roughly here for those who are interested. I also had a subdural hematoma that kept me in the hospital for an extra 24 hours so that they could make sure that it was going down and it wasn't going to have to be operated on. I had these pretty amazing facial scars that you can see that I used to love showing off, but unfortunately have disappeared with time. And for a very brief time, I completely lost hearing in my left ear, which one of the doctors who treated me said that was probably because of like swelling and blood pressure that pushed on the optic nerve. And then as I healed, that pressure slowly released. So I've regained most of the hearing in my left ear. I like to describe it as like if my right ear is at 100%, my left ear is like 92. So there are ever so slight occasions where it'll be difficult for me to hear. I have to be really, really careful around loud music. And for any of my friends who are on this call who know how much I love heavy metal music, you'll know that that is occasionally a hard thing to experience. And then there's a little bit of neurological after effects that I joke I want to be some grad student's PhD thesis one day because I'm absolutely terrible with names nowadays. Like people I've known for years, I have to ask them what their name is. And I am the worst at homonyms. So like words that are spelled the same, or sorry, words that are pronounced the same but spelled differently, I'm utterly terrible at them. Never had an issue with them beforehand, but now I will always choose the wrong homonym when I'm writing. So again, if there's anyone knows a PhD in neuroscience, let them know they can get in contact with me. So a little bit of context behind this photo. This is a Christmas ornament that is currently on my tree. When I went down the trail and ran into a couple who was a husband and wife duo, they asked me like, oh, like what happened? Are you okay? And I said like, yeah, I feel a little rough. Like, does it look bad? And their response was just, yeah, it looks pretty bad. Do you want a photo? And I was like, sure, I'll take a photo because I'm dazed and out of my mind. And this is the photo that they took with me on the trail. So a couple years later, my mother-in-law, who has a wicked sense of humor, decided to turn this into a Christmas ornament, which is now prominently on my tree. So as you can imagine, having this type of accident so early in my mountaineering, so early in my alpinism and burgeoning love for high places, especially the Sierra, was very emotionally distraught is probably the like most lowest level I can describe that is as. There was a long time where even climbing in the gym with friends, I would get absolutely terrified whenever I was on the wall. I would freeze up. I would have nightmares beforehand. For about a year, I had this recurring nightmare where I would be like walking on an icy trail and there would be some force that was propelling me to keep going on. And I would have no choice but to keep going. And then eventually I'd slip and fall and then I would wake up. Um, and like I said, for a long time, I wondered, like, do I even like this? Is this something that is for me? Having such a bad accident so early on also made me think, like, am I not responsible for this? Is my body not appropriate for it? And it took a long time of like soul searching, climbing in the gym, talking with a therapist, talking with friends who were into climbing. I have an acquaintance of mine named Chelsea Berg, who's a very accomplished mountaineer in Chile, and she had a pretty bad accident a couple years before mine. And so she talked to me for quite a bit about like, no, you do have a place in the sport. The only time you wouldn't is if you didn't learn anything from this. And I really try to take that to heart. So all this coming to kind of get to the main event, which is my 2023 Sierra Nevada trip. I took it kind of all the forces kind of aligned together. I had, like I said, done some visits back to the Sierra, especially the Lake Tahoe area before. My wife and I have gone a few times. I had a couple contracts for work that took me to California. So then I drive over to the peaks and do some hiking. But 2023 confluence of factors allowed me to take 5 months off and pursue this. The first was, as I said, my contract for COVID-19 response with the state of California was going to end at the end of June. I have a really good relationship with my boss, and the company that I still work for, and I was able to negotiate some time off. Uh, and as I said, I really wanted to recover my interest in high places again. I was so nervous that this sport was not for me, that alpinism wasn't for me, that like I said, I was too irresponsible. I was too immature, either emotionally or mentally, that I would make the same mistake again. And I kind of wanted to prove myself that that wasn't true, that I did learn from my fall, that I do love climbing and mountains, and I want to make that my life. At the time, there was also the 2023 FKT that was being done by Nathan Longhurst. I had read some of his planning stuff in February and March of that year. I very distinctly remember my wife and I were taking a vacation to Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, and I like somehow stumbled upon their website and was immediately enthralled by this concept of something called the Sierra Peak section. So their FKT was ongoing when I was there, or sorry, it had just passed. It was in 2022. But as I keep saying, I was absolutely fascinated by what they had accomplished, and I was very, very interested in exploring these peaks that they had done incredible things with the year before. As this is a screenshot also of an email that I got. So I applied for a grant through an organization called Paradox Sports, which is based in Boulder, Colorado. Paradox Sports is an adaptive climbing and adaptive adventuring organization. And by that, I mean they focus specifically on people who have physical or cognitive disabilities, and facilitating their ability to climb, to pursue cool things, etc. I applied for a grant with them called the Paradox Grant that I received $700 for in order to fund this trip, with the acknowledgement that I would tag Paradox Sports in my photos and my Instagram posts, as well as like provide a trip report for them at the end of the year. I've done some volunteering with Paradox since I've been back as well. For those who are interested in adaptive climbing, adaptive adventuring, organizations like Paradox, as well as the Adaptive Climbing Initiative, are absolutely incredible organizations, and I would encourage everyone on this call to look them up if they are interested in. You can tell how excited I was when I got this email, because if you look at the upper right of that screenshot, you can see 30 minutes ago. That's because as soon as I saw this, I screenshotted it on my phone and sent it to as many people as I could, telling them how excited I was. So enormous shout out to Paradox Sports for facilitating that. So let's talk a little bit about the trip. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about what I did and kind of how I navigated the absolutely ridiculous, in a good way, 2023 Sierra Snow Year. I'll talk a little bit about the results of that trip and also some of the logistics and how I navigated what at the time I did not know what I was getting into when it came to the snow. So my original plan was to start from the north to the south in the Sierra Nevada. Thankfully, that part was successful. My goal was to initially finish a list of 63 peaks called the Tahoe Ogles, which I'll talk a little bit about later. There are a bunch of peaks that are within the broader Lake Tahoe area. In fact, this screenshot is of my account on Gaia GPS after I finished the Tahoe Ogles, and you can see all my little cute little squigglies from when I was pursuing those peaks. My goal after that was to spend a couple weeks in Yosemite, and then like spend a lot of time in the Evolution Basin, go to Bishop, go to the Palisades, spend time like deeper in Kings Canyon near the Great Western Divide, and then finish, like I said, at Whitney Portal. I successfully got midweek permits to climb Mount Whitney and be in the Whitney Zone on October 10th, which was a year and a day before my wedding. Fun fact. And my goal was also to more or less follow the SPS list. For those on the call who might not be as familiar with the Sierra Peak section, the Sierra Peak section, SPS, as I said, maintains a list of 247 peaks on their peak bagging list. These are kind of like the who's who of the mountains, and the kind of running joke is even the bad SPS peaks are pretty darn good. And it's a really good roadmap for exploring and using as like a jumping off point to explore other parts of the Sierra Nevada. I've had an excellent time pursuing the list, and it's taken me to incredible places, but don't want to get too ahead of myself too fast. My plan, as I said, was to be there from late May until mid-October with my goal of avoiding the snow. Now, as anyone can tell you from 2023, the Sierra Nevada had an absolute record-shattering snowfall. I originally made these plans in like January or early February, and I remember starting to look at the snow totals at the end of February and thinking, my God, I've made a huge mistake. Because we had, if I recall correctly, and by the end of March, there was 257% snowpack, which means that the normal snowpack, the median snowpack was double and then some for that year. Uh, if you were a skier at this time, you had the time of your life. I was not a skier. I was a hiker and a climber trying to get out on some peaks. And avoiding the snow didn't really work out that well. The left photo of this is the second mountain that I climbed on this trip, Mount Elwell. It's one of the far northern Tahoe Ogles peaks. It was pure winter conditions. That middle photo is Mount Tom, which I attempted to climb through the Northwest Ridge on like October 3rd. Huge snowstorm had hit, completely blanketed the entire ridge. I got 200 feet from the summit and realized it was going to take hours to go any further. And then the far right photo is from a trip I did in Desolation Wilderness at the end of June. And again, it kind of looks like a normal march. So my plans completely 100% changed because this type of photo was what I was experiencing when I got there. Sorry, I misspoke. The far left photo on this is actually of Devil's Peak outside of Tahoe. This was taken in like mid-June. This is Mount Elwell. The lake was completely frozen over. There was snow everywhere. Um, as I keep saying, it was more like March conditions when I got there at the end of May. And I remember texting my wife in the beginning of June and just being like, I need to come home. This was such a bad idea. Like, it is miserable conditions right now. It took me like 8 hours to go up Mount Rose, and I've trail run that in like four. I was beside myself, but was still able to have an excellent time, and I just adjusted my timeline. I like to say that I trained in high gravity when it came to dealing with that snow. It certainly put a lot of hair on my chest, and it helped actually feel, in retrospect, I feel like I got an extremely unique picture of the Sierra Nevada and seeing a lot of lakes and a lot of peaks in conditions that not many people get to experience them in. There were a lot of seasonal alpine lakes that had melted, refrozen, and then melted again that were in incredible circumstances, incredible conditions that I can't imagine would be the same in the future. And you'll see some of those photos. So my actual timeline, what I actually ended up doing was spending time in Lake Tahoe in May, June, and then early July, finishing up the Tahoe Ogles, doing some of those northernmost Sierra Peak section peaks. This is a photo of the Sweetwater Range, where a couple Tahoe Ogle peaks are. It's this incredible desert, high alpine environment between like 9,500 and, if I recall correctly, like 11,200 feet roughly. Absolutely beautiful. Flowers everywhere because as that snow melted, it just fed the wildlife and the flora and the fauna in incredible ways. I ended up spending a month in Yosemite National Park in August. And when am I ever going to say that I was able to live in Yosemite for a month for another time in my life? In September, I spent a lot of time in the Mammoth Lakes area and also went down to like the Bear Creek Spire area. And then October, I did a little bit of time in the North Palisades area. So like Lake Sabrina, North Lake, South Lake, for those who are familiar, near Bishop. Did a few days over in Kearsarge Pass. I spent like a week in Whitney Portal. And then I spent 3 or 4 days back in the Lake Tahoe area to do a couple, once more around the sun peaks that I had done early on in the trip. And I kind of wanted to revisit and see how they felt now. I got very used to seeing this this sign. As the snow melted, things flooded like you would not believe. I remember texting Tina Bowman and asking for Beta to climb Mount Clarence King in Yosemite National Park. And I remember, Tina, I'm not sure if you remember this, but you told me like the river crossings are absolutely ridiculous right now. Please be as careful as you possibly can. And that weren't kidding. I had a mulligan, an attempt to summit Mount Baldwin, for those who are familiar with the SPS peak outside of Mammoth Lakes. And the normal ascent route up Mount Baldwin through like Bright Dot Lake crosses this tiny little creek that is very beautiful, very easy to just kind of hop skip over. It was a raging torrent when I got there in late September. Uh, the mosquitoes, likewise, were fun to navigate. This was me after doing the Northern Crystal Range Traverse, which has a bunch of Tahoe Ogles Peak, and just the entire like 8 hours, I was inundated by mosquitoes. It was one of the most miserable hiking experiences I've ever had in my entire life. Really, really cool traverse, but so much snow, so many bugs that just took full advantage of this newfound standing water that wasn't evaporating anytime soon. And yeah. One question that I always get when I talk about this trip, especially in context of me, so again, might surprise some of my friends being fairly new to the Sierra at the time, was how I like found the routes that I wanted to do. I primarily went on the website Peakbagger. For those who are unfamiliar with Peakbagger, peakbagger.com, it is a website that people can go to and like record the ascents that they've done and all over the world. You can write trip reports and you can provide and upload GPX files that people can look at and download and attempt to follow the route that you did. I also looked at the SPS Scrambler ratings document. So the Scrambler ratings were created by Phil S. Bates, who is a member of SPS, in an attempt to expand the lower four numbers of the Yosemite decimal system to provide a little bit more clarity on like expectations for scrambling. So YDS goes from 1 through 5. Climbing ratings are like your 5.9, your 5.11A, your 5.12Cs, etc. But the 1 through 4 are specifically the non-technical side. So I was able to use Phil's incredible compendium at the time of, sorry, I was just admitting someone. I was able to use Phil's incredible compendium of various routes to help plan my routes a little bit better. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. The point being, though, is one thing that I really, really love about this Sierra Nevadas mountaineering and alpinism community is a lot of the times the routes will just have very brief capsule descriptions. And almost all the time I've found that it gives me enough information for me to know where I'm going, but less information so that I can give myself an adventure and challenge my route finding abilities while still having a general idea of what to go. And if for whatever reason I wanted more granular information, if I was a little bit nervous about XYZ ascent, or if it was a little potentially more technical than I anticipated, then I had Peakbagger trip reports and those GPX files that could help get me where I was going. Also, shout outs to Bob Bird. Many of you know him. Bob Bird has a website where he has extremely in-depth trip reports and a lot of photos of various mountains in the Sierra Nevada. And again, when I wanted a little bit more granular information, I would also use his website to support me. This is a photo that I took just a couple hours ago of what is slowly becoming a very well highlighted copy of R.J. Secor's book, The High Sierra, Peaks, Passes, and Trails. As many of you know, it is the Bible for the Sierra Nevada. It became an extremely well-loved book as I did my research. And quite frankly, it's very fun just to kind of read when I was sleeping in my car through most of the trip. This is my baby. I took this photo just a few hours ago as well. A lot of the time when I was doing this trip, I either camped in the desert, so like in BLM land, right near like South Crater Mountain or outside of Lee Vining, or I was just sleeping in my car. I unfortunately do not have a photo of my sleep setup, but let you know that I got very, very, very good at contorting my 6'2" frame into the back seats of this modest, shall we say, Jeep Compass from 2015. A lot of my time when I wasn't climbing was either spent updating my trip reports on Peakbagger. I wrote a trip report for almost all of the mountains and all of the routes that I climbed, which was pretty cool. And I also brought a shoebox full of books with me. So when I was on the trip for like the first few months until I really got my sea legs under me, I guess the opposite of sea legs, the mountain legs under me, I would be on a mountain every 4 days, and then I would like take a 0 day for after that. And I think I read like 15 books. It was awesome. And it was really fun to kind of like reflect on my experience as fresh as it possibly was, share it with the Peak Bagger community, kind of give back to the mountains as best as I could. And it's kind of fun in retrospect now to kind of click back on some of these peaks from 2023 and think a little bit about what I did and where my mind was at the time when I was writing these, when I was out there. Like, I will read my trip report for like Round Top, and Round Top like scared the bejesus out of me the first time I did it. And now like that mountain is like a warm hug, and it's one of my favorite things to just jaunt up when I have a second, when I'm in the Lake Tahoe area. Yeah, it's almost like his self-historiography to look back and see where my brain was and really like regrowing and regaining that love of the mountains that I keep talking about and seeing my like burgeoning comfort coming back in high places. I remember before going up Mount Dana, I texted my wife about how nervous I was because I had never been on a peak above 13,000 feet before then. And in fact, so Peak Bagger has some statistics on it that can show you like your progressive highest summit as you keep going. I remember being like, oh, my highest summit's Pyramid Peak. Oh, now my highest summit's like Friel Peak, which is 10,800. And you know, by the end of the trip, I had 20 or 30 13ers under my belt, multiple 14ers with Mount Whitney and Mount Mirror just being a couple of them. And that was a very uh, I keep coming back to the word fulfilling, but emotionally fulfilling, as well as, again, demonstrating to myself that, like, no, I do have a place here. I do love the mountains. I do love the Alpine. This is an important place for me to be. So this photo is the first photo that my wife took of me when I got home. I am typically about 165 to 170 pounds. I was about 148 when this photo was taken, so I lost a lot of weight that I probably didn't need to when I was on this trip. And I'm holding my cat, who is thoroughly nonplussed at being held by an extremely smelly man who has not showered for about 25 days by this point. I had 190 summits by the end of it. Some groups of summits I'm counting under the same summit. So like I did 6 summits of the Echo Peaks, but they're all kind of the same thing. So I just counted them as one summit. 67 of those were SPS peaks. I had 1,300 miles with 410,000 feet of elevation gain. My Strava recap that year was very exciting to look at. I had 6 mulligans. I don't believe in failed ascents. I believe in mulligans. For those of you who have played golf or have not played golf, I should say, a mulligan is like when you tee off real bad and you're like, I'd like to call that one. Let's do a redo. You can call a mulligan. So I don't believe the only failed summit is the one that you don't get home from in my book. Everything else is a mulligan. I had exactly 1 injury, which I'll go over. I had exactly 1 epic, which I'll go over. Like I said, I read about 19 books, and according to Spotify Wrapped that year, I listened to 9.5 total days of podcasts on my phone. Most of the peaks that I did were solo, and I had a few friends and partners that I met up with along the way, but other than that, it was me and listening to people talk about Dark Souls or video games or other mountain ranges nearby. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about the trip. It would take a long time for me to go over every peak that I was fortunate enough to go on. So I'm gonna give you some highlights of the best adventures that I think I had and what led to them, what made them great. I'll talk about a few of the close calls and the mulligans that I also had and what I think I learned from them. So as I said before, the first focus on the trip was completing the Tahoe Ogles. Those are, again, a list of 63 mountains that are in the greater Lake Tahoe region, roughly stretching from Adams Peak, which is the northernmost SPS peak, going down to the Sweetwater Range. It was great. I had done, I think, 15, no, maybe like closer to 18 or 19 now that I think about it, peaks before I had gone. So the rest of them I did on this trip. Um, the left peak is Old Man Mountain. So one of my favorite kind of escarpments in the Northern Sierra that I just really kind of love that swoop that it has on the summit. If you're driving on that highway that's north of Lake Tahoe, this is one of the first peaks you'll see on the way. And then the photo on the right is Red Lake Peak, which was it has a class 3 summit block. And again, it absolutely scared the hell out of me the first time I ever did it. Really fun peak to revisit nowadays and just like be amongst this incredible like volcanic summit uh, that like really, really typifies the Northern Sierra to me. Couple other photos. You saw this one before on the left. That is Desolation Wilderness. So I did like a 3-day backpacking trip in June where I hit like Mount Price. I did Dick's Peak that was in the area, Jack's Peak, more Tahoe Ogles. I planned on doing a few more, but I cannot overstate how demoralizing the snow occasionally was. And it would have been great if this were like April. But because things were starting to melt and it was no longer below freezing at night, everything was mashed potatoes. My thighs were godly by the end of this trip. And then the photo on the right is Thimble Peak. So Thimble Peak is not a Tahoe Ogles peak, but it's on what the Tahoe Ogles website calls the Ogles Plus, which are like peaks they would add if they redid the list today. And it's this really cool, like 20-ish foot thimble shaped summit, as you can see here, that just kind of shuts upward like this broken tooth monolith you can climb. Very, very fascinating. Would highly recommend it to anyone who's in the Kirkwood area. Another peak that is on the Tahoe Ogles list, and it's the only technical peak on the list, is Doc Del Goet Mountain, formerly known as Jeff Davis Peak. In the early September, I traveled back up to the Tahoe area after spending some time around Mammoth, and myself and several other like local mountaineers, so like Levi Gibson, some of you might know, joined me on this. Brett Marchesini joined me on this. And we climbed the 5-2 route on Doc Del Goet, and 3 of us at the same time finished our Tahoe Ogles that day. Brett Marchesini had never climbed before, and he was an absolute rock star. He had never rappelled before, and we got him up. He sent the 5-2 with absolute aplomb, and we all stood on the summit together. So very great experience. One of the cooler memories, not just for the climb, which I led. And sorry, let me rewind a little bit. I led the 5-2 route on this as well, which makes this mountain even more special to me because, again, proving to myself that I do have a place in the Alpine. I do have a place in this world. I can do it. I have the mental fortitude to do it. This was a very fulfilling summit to be a part of and stand on top of it, not just with friends, but also, again, demonstrating to myself that I have the ability to be here and I can make it fun, not just scary. One of the other coolest memories of this trip was the Cathedral Range Traverse, which I did on August 27th. So many of you probably know a wonderful gentleman by the name of Mike Toffee. Mike Toffee is one of the most, if he's not one of the most, he's going to be one of the most accomplished alpinists in the Sierra Nevada. He has done so many great routes, soloed so many great routes. Excuse me, he's put up so many routes on Mountain Project and directly informed the creation of and the update of guidebooks. I had a buddy of mine named Preston who is from the Southeast near where I grew up, who joined me for a week. We did a bunch of climbing in Yosemite. We did a couple peaks together. And one of the things that we did was joining up with Mike and a couple of his friends and traversing the Cathedral Range. So we started from Unicorn Peak, went over Coxcomb, which is the photo on the left, traversed over Echo Ridge to the Echo Peaks, which I'm climbing on the right. I think that's one of the coolest photos I've ever had taken of me on the peaks. Thanks again to Mike. And then we finished up and came down to the Cathedral Lakes. This is such a cool area. And for me, it is like the epitome of altitude is not everything when it comes to the Alpine. None of these peaks are over 11,000 feet. Most of them are like 10,000-ish. But Unicorn Peak has an incredible series of Class 4 summits. Coxcomb, we soloed the 5-4 Southwest Ridge together with space in between, just in case. And absolutely just extraordinary summit that is now the photo of the Andy Smatkow emblem patch that is now available through SPS. The Echo Peaks are this collection of, if I get my math right, I think it's about 10 peaks, all at least class 3. Many of them are class 4. A couple of them have fairly serious climbs associated with them that are just a scrambler's playground. And you can tell I'm having the time of my life on this. This is the traverse from Echo Peak 1 to Echo Peak 3. Highly recommend this. I really cannot overstate how cool the cathedral range in general is, and especially this traverse. So that's me scrambling up toward the top of Unicorn Peak on the left. We did the 5-7 variation, which kind of goes like directly over some of the ridgeline. And then the right is just one photo of several of the Echo Peaks. And you can just see how many of these awesome little summits there are that you can explore and find new ways to get up. I would go back to the Echo Peaks and just spend like a day on those. Another one of the cooler routes that I did that was a little bit of a casualty to the snow year was when I climbed Pipsqueak Spire along with Mount Dade in the Bear Creek Spire area on September 29th. So for those who aren't familiar with the Bear Creek Spire area, there is a line of really amazing 13,000 foot and above peaks with the titular Bear Creek Spire, which is an incredible mountaineering and alpinism venture. Then you have Mount Dade, Mount Abbott, Mount Mills. The normal route up Mount Dade is through what's called the Hourglass route. It's a little bit cut off on the left photo, but it is the route that's somewhat in the middle that has some snow on it that comes up through a kind of a scree field that you can approach the summit. This photo does not show how bad the snow was. I was not a very comfortable snow climber at the time, so I did not attempt the couloir on my own. And I instead made up what I think is a pretty cool route where I went to the left of this photo, kind of up that snowy ridge, traversed over Pipsqueak Spire, and then came over to Mount Dade and then retraced my steps and returned to the call. So Pipsqueak Spire is on the right. Getting to it is roughly class 2 to class 3. There's some harder options that you can take if you want that get up to class 4. And then you are put face to face with this roughly 15-foot spire that I think the easiest route goes a 5-6 slab technically. What I did is I got both hands on that leftmost kind of our side of the arete that you can tell, hucked my left foot over and just heaved and got my hands on the summit and was very happy with with counting that as being at the top. Pipsqueak Spire is super cool. One of the things that one of the many things, but one of the top 5, I guess, that I love of the Sierra Nevada is there's just so many of these like little cool spires and options for just pure adventure that you can find if you're willing to look for it. RJ Secor's book is, of course, like like I said, the Bible for finding these places, but there's so much that isn't on the SPS list. There's so much that, like, for people who are altitude chasers, there's so much that doesn't hit 13,000 feet, much less 14,000 feet. And it was incredible. And as I keep coming back to, very fulfilling, very affirming, very much part of my self-actualization to get to the tops of these types of peaks and safely have my adventure that way. On October 8th, I traversed from Mount Gould to Glacier Spike. So these are near Kearsarge Pass. The photo on the far left is a photo that I took of a seasonal alpine lake that was still frozen over by this point, with Nameless Pyramid in the back, which I haven't climbed, but I need to go back to. I literally ran into a friend of mine named Max Reese on this part of the trip. He and I have since become pretty good friends. I've climbed together, have done some mountaineering and alpinism together, and when he gets back to Colorado, hopefully we'll do some skiing together. Just a great example of the serendipity of the mountains and literally running into somebody who ends up becoming a buddy and a partner later on. The middle photo is traversing from Mount Rixford over toward Glacier Spike. Glacier Spike, by the way, in my opinion, is one of the coolest names for a mountain that's ever been. And then the right is Falkor Peak, which is not an SPS peak. It's not a 13er, but is this really like sharp kind of swooping mountain with these incredible rock bands, as you can see, that bisect or the bisect and all kinds of sect the mountain itself. Extremely amazing. One of the best adventures I had, and like I said, made a new friend. And then finally, penultimately, what I called my Whitney Portal Buffet. I spent 3 days doing as much as I could in the Whitney area, again, with dealing with the snow as much as possible. The big day on this was October 10th, where I did Mount Whitney, Mount Muir, Keeler Needle, Discovery Pinnacle, Thor Peak, and Wotan's Throne in a single, I think it was 13-hour push. Huge day, one of the biggest days that I've ever had in the mountains, extraordinarily fulfilling. And even like post Hurricane Hillary, remember that? Yeah, dumped like 2 feet of snow in Whitney Portal. Had an incredibly fun and, like I keep coming back to, very, very, very unique time. The photo on the left is when I really started becoming a dirty mountain man toward the end of this trip. It's still having an absolute blast, though. I think that's Mount Irvine in the back. And then the photo on the right is one of my favorite photos I took this entire trip. And this is like the pyramidal steps that take you up Mount McAdie, which is one of my favorite mountains in the entire Whitney zone, like Whitney Portal greater area, and something that a lot of people don't experience because they like will only come for Mount Whitney. And then finally, one of the last things I did was returning to Lake Tahoe toward the end of my trip. Like I said, revisiting a few peaks that I wanted to see how my relationship with them has changed. And also, it turns out I had one more Tahoe Ogles Peak to do. So there is a peak called Devil's Peak that has some controversial land access issues. I had submitted my application to be acknowledged for completing the Tahoe Ogles, and I was informed we do still require you to do Devil's Peak. So on the last day, as the last mountain, I went with a friend of mine, Phil. We found a legal route to climb Devil's Peak that did not have the trespassing issues that were reported by other climbers. Stood atop its basaltic summit and celebrated both the end of the trip as well as finally completing the Tahoe Ogles. So it was a beautiful way to kind of bring the trip together and then head home to Colorado the next day. I am a little bit behind my time, so I'm kind of going to run through the close calls and mulligans a little quickly. The only injury I had on this trip was I crushed a fingernail coming off of Mount Huntington. It's one of the Vagmark and Sierra Crest peaks. Kind of a cool mountain, super chossy, and I wouldn't recommend the route that I took, so please ignore my GPS file on Peak Bagger. I did not take a very good gully up. You can see the peak on the right-hand side. There's a lot of gullies. Don't take the one I did. I realized after the fact that I have a tendency to point at routes that I did not complete and make unhappy faces at them. Pyoyak Dome, a friend of mine and I soloed the south face, and we did not realize that we had a pretty serious down climb at the end in order to get off on the north face. Red and White Mountain, I was just too tired and didn't feel like it. Mount Tom got way too snowed in. The other close call that I had was with my friend Preston when we climbed Cathedral Peaks, Southeast Buttress. I'm acquaintances with Matt Cornell, who has described the Southeast Buttress as the greatest 5-6 in the world. I'm inclined to agree. Unfortunately, Preston and I got stuck in a windstorm where we were on the summit of Cathedral Peak for about 9 hours, from I think it was 8 p.m. until, around 3 a.m., so about 7 hours. We got down safely, very shaken up, but a good reminder to always check that weather forecast and don't get complacent before going up. And what's next? I hope it's clear that this trip did help me recover and revitalize my love for the high peaks. I've been a member of the Sierra Peak section ever since. I've been fortunate to go out for the Sierra Challenge, and I'm now very, very active in my community here in Colorado. Uh, so some of my current projects and pursuits, doing a lot of climbing and trad in Eldorado State Park, or yeah, Eldorado State Park here in Colorado. Incredibly place to do trad climbing. Been doing a lot of bouldering with my friends out west, especially in Moab. Photo of the upper left is Slim Pickens. It's a V3 Plus at Big Basin Boulders, and the beta is indeed to hump your way up that rock. Squeeze those thighs together. You'll get up there eventually. I participated all 10 days of the Sierra Challenge in 2025, where I got second place for the most number of peaks climbed. So I did 25 peaks. One of my current goals is to do non-standard routes on all of the Colorado 14ers. This is my second season of skiing, and I'm really excited about that. And I've got a couple of big mountain plans for 2026 that I'm planning with friends. So looking at pursuing Carten's Pyramid within the next couple years. I'm also looking at climbing Mount Rainier with my main mountaineering partner, as well as Gannett Peak and Mount Granite to knock off a couple state high points. The photo on the bottom right, a bunch of my friends and I climbed Castleton Tower in April to celebrate a birthday of one of our really close friends. Uh, I climbed a 10B, excuse me, let me rephrase. I followed a 10B off-wit that completely destroyed my body in the absolute best way. And then we actually camped and slept on the summit of Castleton Tower to celebrate our buddy's birthday. I am very, very lucky that I have an incredible group of friends and fellow climbers here in Colorado that I've been able to pursue things with who have likewise done wonders for me, like realizing that I have the efficacy to be in the climbing community, that I have a place in this world, that the accident that I had in 2020 does not necessarily need to be the blueprint for how I view myself for the rest of my life. And thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time today, being here at this presentation. That's my Instagram account if you want to follow me and get in contact. And if anyone here is not a member of the Sierra Peak section, but they're kind of interested in what that entails, I am the outreach chair, so feel more than welcome to get out to me. I am now going to exit out of this and bring up the Zoom and unmute everyone. All right, let's see if I can do this without asking everyone just to awkwardly unmute. All right, I think I'm getting it. Michael, I'm pretty sure I just selected you to unmute.
Thank you, Dylan. That was really interesting and enlightening, and I can't believe you got that many peaks in that big snow year. So, especially the SPS one. So, really great job. I was up there in the north too, but not till August. So nice work getting all those in that year. Um, so we're gonna sort of start a Q&A. You can either raise your hand in the video if you have your video on, or if there's a little sort of emoji hand raise if you
No questions?
go to the bottom on the reaction button, you'll click on that and it'll say raise
You want to
hand.
turn the video on or camera?
So, all right. So, and you can also type in the question in the chat. So you have three ways of doing it. So if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. Yes, go for it. Is it Phil? Phil, you may have to unmute yourself. Or did we?
Oh,
Yeah, there he
there we
is.
go. Finally. I was like, host wouldn't allow you to unmute yourself. So I'm like,
Yeah, sorry, I had to click manually
all good.
ask to unmute. I apologize.
Hey, no problem. I just want to say first, thanks. Great presentation. Really interesting. Loved seeing some familiar spots. But I think my question was, you said or close to the beginning, you had a friend, I think another climber from Chile, who said, with your first nearly catastrophic accident, one good way to not make it your last accident is, what have you just learned something from it? So I'm curious if you had to sum up what you learned from that first incident, if there's a thing to share from that.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is, the carpenter would say measure first, cut once. And I think that applies also to planning trips in the Alpine. Do your research. Like there's nothing necessarily more pure to just kind of wing it. And I definitely got complacent and kind of going just winging it. I should have done more research on the route. I should have been more knowledgeable of bailout options. And I also think like in terms of the broader theme of self-efficacy that I keep describing is being okay with knowing when to turn around and knowing how to turn around. Instead of realizing that I was in a bad position and that this route was not the route for me this day, I should have just gone the way I came and gotten back to my car on an easy class 2 scramble. Instead, I was hard-headed and no, I have to be on the summit. I think the title of my presentation was somewhat ironically called Summit Fever Dreams. And Summit Fever is definitely an insidious killer in my opinion because it's so tempting to feel like the climb doesn't count unless you're standing on the summit. And I've liked to think that I've tried very hard at taking that out of myself and real like I said before, I don't believe in unsuccessful summits. I just believe in mulligans. Like there's another try in the future. Don't worry about it. You hit the ball and it went way, way, way out of bounds. That's okay. Yeah, and I would say another thing is really being honest about my abilities. And this goes into the measure twice, cut once phenomenon. But I was very new to the Sierra at the time. And now I'm a lot more experienced, and now I'm a lot more careful and cautious about the routes that I choose. But at the time, like I said, my focus was just kind of on winging it and seeing what happens and trusting that I would know the right thing almost instinctually, which feels silly to say out loud. But when you're new and you're excited and you really just want to be outside, it's kind of hard to remember to have that humility in the peaks.
Great. Matthew, you may have to unmute yourself, but go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hey, Dylan. Yeah, Matt here. We've communicated a little bit on Facebook about various YDS
Hi.
rating systems. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've contributed to Peak Bagger. I've used countless of your trip reports, dozens of your GPX files. You are an incredible resource. I just wanted to say thank you. And I do want to ask you if you ever went back and got Tom.
No, unfortunately. I have gotten Red and White Mountain. I actually did that at the end of the Sierra Challenge this year. And of course it was one of the easiest peaks of the entire trip. I'm trying to think of the mulligans that I have done. I failed Sprudel Tower because Sprudel Tower ostensibly is a class 4 chimney. It's not. That thing's like 5'8". But I do need to go back to Mount Tom and redo that Southwest Ridge because I had a total blast until I got to, again, 2 feet of snow covering everything and realized, probably not today. So
Thanks.
eventually, but
Good
thanks.
luck with everything.
Yeah, I
Great to
appreciate
follow
that.
you.
And your
Keep it up.
words are very kind about the Peak Bagger trip reports. Like I like to use that as kind of my way to give back. So I'm glad that they're useful and that you're still alive.
Very much appreciated. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Let's see. Anybody else raising their hand? I don't see physically. I have a question. How
Sure.
did you, why, you're from Florida, live in Colorado. How did you find the Sierra? Usually people stay in their home state mostly.
Yeah, so I should say I left Florida in 2015, and this is probably another story, but for another time, but to pursue glacier tourism in Alaska. So I lived on a glacier for a year doing sled dog tourism. And I distinctly remember stepping off the plane and being cold for the first time in my life and thinking, this absolutely freaking rules. Uh, and like I was active in Boy Scouts when I was younger, but I was never really exposed to mountains. So I thought I hated hiking. I thought climbing was a waste of time. And I remember I bring up the time in Alaska because I remember we had 21 staff members and 5 of them had worked at Lake Tahoe ski resorts at some point in their life. So Lake Tahoe was always kind of in the back of my mind. When I applied and got a role doing COVID-19 public health response in California, we were based in Sacramento, so I was an hour away from Lake Tahoe and thought, why not? Let's go check it out. And Pyramid Peak was actually the first peak I summited. My accident occurred on my second summit. And I recall standing on the top and being completely inundated in awe with how beautiful and how majestic the entire area was. And then when I read about Nathan Longhurst's FKT, it just catapulted my interest even more. I will never forget hearing about the mountain called Whaleback and seeing this fin of granite rising up out of the ground. And it just stoked every part of my imagination, is the best way to put it. Like being in Lake Tahoe, like I said, for that first part of COVID-19, seeing the Sierra, seeing these photos, reading about Nathan's trip reports simply made me really, really, really inspired. There's no other way to put it.
Cool. Anyone else?
Oh, Phil was
Phil, I saw his hand waving.
Okay. Hey, Dylan. Question for you. You mentioned, obviously the focus is what a crazy snow year you had there to deal with. And you talked about having to work around that. What I was wondered, when you started this whole thing with the snow, how much experience did you have in climbing on snow, and what kind of gear, if any, did you take with you to deal with some of that?
Yeah, great question. I had done a little bit of peak bagging up in the like Catskills as well as the Adirondacks area. So I had quite a bit of experience already with like microspikes and crampon usage, but not really in like the alpine setting of the Sierra. So I had a set of mountaineering snowshoes that got absolute beat to hell. I still need to replace them actually. And I had like ice axe experience, so I was comfortable with that. I actually had to do an ice axe arrest on Black Buttes, which is a Tahoe Ogles Peak early up in May. I slid maybe 50 feet before successfully being able to arrest, which was very exciting, but hey, I did the right thing. Yeah, because the Sierra was relatively new to me and especially alpinism was relatively new to me, I made sure that I kind of took my sweet time and chose my routes as carefully as possible so that like I wasn't climbing the hourglass on Mount Dade, which you and I have communicated about, having not had experience on that before. So yeah, I had again a lot of ice crampon usage specifically. Anyone who's been to the Catskills in winter can tell you a lot about the ice climbing and such that is there. And it was an easier transition than I expected to doing stuff in the Alpine and the Sierra. There wasn't, or sorry, when I specifically in context of the 2023 Sierra snow year, there was not a ton of really intense snow climbs that I did. And especially because as the summer went on, I had to be very careful that I didn't like get caught in a wet slab avalanche or something along those lines.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Michael. Yep, done. Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Dylan, great talk. I kind of hate the what's next question, but I guess what are you like psyched on learning and getting out of like your future mountain adventures in the next couple years or so?
Yeah, so give you some context on the call. Mike Gapuz is a good friend of mine who lives in Colorado and one of my climbing partners. Mike has really been there for the beginning of some of my more bigger trips, as well as like my burgeoning interest and love of trad climbing, especially in Eldo. And I would say the things that I'm really excited for the future are long technical alpine climbs. One thing that I know I've mentioned to you, Mike, and I'll mention for the audience that I'm really excited about is doing the north face of Capitol Peak, which goes at 5.9, and it's a couple thousand feet of alpine climbing. I would love to do mithril dihedral on Mount Russell, or one of the other 10s in the area. I think that where I really excel is long endurance days in the Alpine, and I want to increase my technical ability on those long days. I'm really interested in doing Mount Rainier in a single 24-hour push. One of my partners that we've been talking about doing Rainier for a while now, and I are looking at doing that next June. as well as like Gannett Peak in Wyoming, likewise in a 24 to 36 hour push as well. So increasing my technical ability, like for long times in the Alpine, is a big thing when it comes to the mountaineering aspect. And climbing in general, I want to also simply expand my abilities as much as possible in the various traditions and such of climbing. I didn't mention this so much in this presentation, but I have discovered that I really love outdoor bouldering and I'm kind of good at it. And I want to see where that goes. I feel like I'm in a very exciting part of my climbing career where everything kind of feels exciting. And I have the self-efficacy as well as the mental fortitude to say, no, I actually can do this and I am kind of good at it. Let's like see how I can use my body as an artistic tool on rock. And that might sound like a little bit of a strained metaphor, but I used to do ballet when I was in undergrad, and the like careful delicacy of movement in ballet that is juxtaposed with extreme strength is perfectly applicable to what I love and what I get out of climbing. And simply seeing what happens with that over the next year is going to be huge for me.
Thanks, Michael, for the question. Last call. All right, Dylan, thanks for the presentation. That was really, really enlightening and informative, and got to know you a little bit better, in some ways. I was going to say registration is opened up for the banquet, so you don't have to be a member to join, but we have a great guest and presenter in Kim Stanley Robinson. So please register. You can do it online now as well as on paper, but online would be preferable, I think, for all of us. So give that a try. Don't forget to register. That's all I got. Anybody else want to add something before we head out?
I think I briefly saw Megan had a hand up earlier, or it went down. Sorry to call you out. Just want to make sure that it's answered. Oh, and let me unmute you if that was true.
I'm good. It's fine.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
All right. Thank you all for coming, and keep an eye out for our third presentation sometime in the I guess, yeah, it's springtime. So thank you for coming out. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Dylan.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Dylan. Great.
Thank you.